Alrighty, so we are sitting down for another TV show related review, and here's going to be an update. Basically, we are going through episodes 9 through 12 of Yu Yu Hakusho. I've been watching the show while doing cardio on the treadmill, so even though I have not wanted to release these as frequently as I have another video to make and I got another slot to fill, so here we are. But these episodes, so the last time we just left off was when sort of basically everything leading up to this tournament that we're going to have to figure out who's going to be the successor to Genkai, the old spiritual lady. That's what we found out at the end of the last episode, that's what we're going to do next. And this first episode, episode 9, kind of gives a little more information about how the conversation's going with Botan to set him up for this. Apparently it's happening over one of their only summer or winter breaks that they get. So Yusuke is pretty pissed off because he wanted to take that time just to relax and do whatever. And then there's kind of a funny joke where Botan offers him, if you go and you succeed, I'll give you these tickets to this martial arts tournament that you can go watch. And Yusuke says, I was just a fish waiting to be put on a line, basically saying that he got suckered into it because of that. But regardless, these next 4 episodes, even though the arc hasn't resolved, I think it's going to resolve in the next episode that I see, have to do with the tournament where this old lady who's this really powerful spiritual arts user is trying to find her successor who she could teach all of her secret techniques to. And in the beginning, you see all these people that have collected to be her successor, and 2 of them kind of get pissed off, and she basically force pushes them into a door, and you see how strong her techniques really are, right? One thing to note is that Kuwabara is present because he is extremely spiritually sensitive, and this is kind of how they're playing into his ability before to kind of sense spiritual things. Now they're using that part of him to kind of flip him into an aid character that is a part of the team. And so before, I guess it's later on he meets Botan and stuff like that, but essentially what's established in this first episode here is that Kuwabara is a legitimate, as far as spiritual stuff goes, he's kind of I don't want to say a genius, he's obviously kind of a dummy in the show, but he has much more spiritual awareness than Yusuke has, even if Yusuke is stronger, right? So it starts out with a lottery where everybody's pulling a ticket and they're ripping it off, and they think it's all chance whether or not they get picked to move on to the next round. But actually, if you have a certain amount of spiritual energy, it turns the paper red. So it's basically designed to be like a litmus test to figure out who should move on to the next round, because if you don't have any energy, then there's just no point for you to be a part of the discussion anyway. So that's kind of where those 2 guys get mad, because they're like, oh, well, we're the shamans from this village and we do all sorts of spiritual practices. How could we not get picked? This is an outrage. And she's like, well, if you didn't get picked, then obviously you're a sham. And that kind of what prompts her to have to force push them into a wall. But anyway, that happens. Kuwabara and Yusuke both pass that test, obviously, and they move on to the second test, which is they have all these sort of arcade machines that are rigged up to be able to determine or figure out your spiritual ability. And that's going to be 1, your raw power, essentially, 2, your sort of sensory, your ability to sense spiritual stuff around you. And then I think the third one was something else, but maybe it's a mixture of the 2. I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, they use these metrics to essentially determine if you can pass on to the next stage. And then that stage is a combat stage. So it kind of also sets up the ability to look at the mismatch between different people before they fight. So, and at the same time, Koenma is super worried that this rando, which by the way, I haven't explained this. The reason why Yusuke is there is because there's this guy Rando who's a yokai, who's an evil spirit, who goes around stealing a bunch of people's techniques after killing them, And so this old lady has some secret techniques that are pretty powerful, and he wants to win the tournament so he can essentially steal her techniques and then kill her. And so part of this journey of this tournament is Yusuke is basically there to figure out which one of the other spiritually enabled people is really Rando, the yokai in disguise. So they do the arcade machines. Kuwabara kind of gets excited because he passes on the strength test, and he's like, see, I bet you can't beat that. And then Yusuke beats it by a little bit. It's kind of a funny scene, but they definitely layer on that Kuwabara's spiritual sensitivity, like his ability to feel what's going on around him, is actually super adept, because they have this one machine where it's supposed to be rock, paper, scissors, and he gets like a perfect score because he can sense what thing the machine's going to throw out. You know what I mean? And then later on, I guess might as well move on. So I think we're in the next episode at this point, but the next part of the tournament is a combat thing, but in the dark. And so what it really tests is, one, your ability to sense people spiritually instead of just using your eyes. And then two, like your actual combat strength, stuff like that. And again, they kind of play into Kuwabara's adept spiritual sensitivity, because while in the darkness, he can see his opponent perfectly fine because he can feel him around him. Whereas when Yusuke has his fight, he's basically blind. But that being said, Kuwabara, I believe, still has the issue, if I remember correctly, like the guy knows how to mask his spiritual presence. So he's still kind of in the dark. And then second, the guy that Kuwabara's fighting, because this first episode of the combat stuff is basically all about Kuwabara, but it's really cool because what happens is through the course of fighting, sorry, excuse me, but through the course of fighting, he basically calls the guy's punches weak because he's been beat up by Yusuke every day. And then that tempts the guy to bring out his like wooden sword that he can imbue with a bunch of spiritual energy. And because of that, now Kuwabara is kind of getting beat down. But what ends up happening is that almost as like an innate defense, he protects himself and the wood breaks, and then, now it's like, how are we going to fight? And the other guy's like, all right, well, it doesn't even matter. I'll use this splinter I have left to kill you and it won't matter. But Kuwabara picks up a piece of this wooden sword, and then all of a sudden, almost like it's just like, how in some things they say, like, if you have a high capacity for talent in a certain area, you just kind of get it, or like you just do things that you would have otherwise not known how to do, but because you have a certain aptitude for it, you kind of understand it innately. Well, Kuwabara is able to manifest spiritual energy in like real life, and he turns this freaking shard of the wooden sword into like a goddamn lightsaber. And so then that's kind of like his big power up that helps him win that battle. And it was a cool thing because now he's kind of got his own like ray gun equivalent thing, which is even funnier because Kuwabara, when he hears about Yusuke's ray gun, he's like, so I get a sword and you get a firearm? How does that seem fair? And Botan's just like, well, he's the spirit detective. You're just some guy, so it's okay. But I just thought all that was kind of funny. I really like how this author, or I guess, whoever's involved with the show, the way that they portray kind of these like tournament arcs is always, at least so far, is like kind of goofy while at the same time serious. And then also nobody hesitates to like loop Kuwabara into what's going on. Like they tell him about the rando guy or that they're looking out for somebody. And then Kuwabara, because, it's consistent with his character's values, he's just like, okay, well, yeah, I'll help you find this guy or whatever's going to happen. But I'm going to keep going with this tournament. But he's like almost on their side immediately, right? So I think that was pretty cool. But then the next fight is Yusuke versus this dude who's got like a helmet on, and they're in the dark. Neither of them can sense each other really, but this other dude has trained to have this helmet on to block off all of his senses so that he can basically get the same advantage that Kuwabara has, where he can sense people in the dark. Because while Kuwabara can do it with the distraction of all his human senses, this guy can't. So when he puts on this helmet, now that like kind of cuts out all the noise and allows him to feel for Yusuke. And part of that problem is that Yusuke is kind of getting his ass beat while this is going on. And it's honestly hilarious because it's basically like the first plot armor moment in the show, the first like heavy plot armor moment. But everybody in the show makes fun of it as like kind of an asshole. So it's almost like fitting in a way. But we still haven't figured out who Rando is, and it's definitely not this guy. And what Yusuke ends up doing is he tries to grab him, but then this guy's a martial artist expert, so he's good at throwing techniques, and he throws Yusuke across the room. And here they establish an important thing about Yusuke's powers, where the old lady is impressed with both Yusuke and Kuwabara, and she becomes aware, like through seeing Botan and stuff, that they are Koenma's men. And so she's like, interesting, they're Koenma's men. But Yusuke, when faced, like we just said before, where they were like, oh, he's the worst type of human. Every time he gets hit down, his energy increases. The lady basically said that, Yusuke has this interesting quality about him where the more and more fired up he gets, the more and more spiritual energy he has. And that's not the same for everybody else. In a lot of other like shonen type shows, that's basically, and let's be honest guys, it's probably based on this, but that's kind of a normal trait that as people get more emotionally fired up, they get more powerful. But in this show, that's something that is unique to Yusuke. And so that is perfect because it almost creates the perfect set of circumstances so that any sort of like plot armor moment that happens in the future is justified. Like if Yusuke uses his last bit of energy, but then all of a sudden he gives a great speech and he defeats the dude anyway, it's been explained. We know that his power surges when he gets fired up. But anyway, the way he defeats this dude is the old lady smokes a cigarette and gets pissed off because she's like, Yusuke's not really doing anything to defend himself against this dude, and she throws it into the arena. So when he got thrown, we thought that he just had a failed attempt, but really he was being clever, and he had actually picked up that lit cigarette and put it in the dude's waistband of his gi so that the next time he attacked, he could blast him with the ray gun, and that was that. So that's how Yusuke wins. I think that was a pretty fitting win. Obviously, the cigarette thing is like a total ass pull. And don't ask me if I went back and looked to see if the cigarette was always there, because I've been watching anime. I've been watching anime long enough to know that that's a pointless thing. I'm not going to go back. It doesn't matter, because even if it's not there, they'll write that stuff in the story no matter how consistent or inconsistent it is. And we just have to deal with the absurdity of it. But thankfully, like I said, everybody's like, so you found a cigarette on the floor and you put it in his waistband and that's how you got him? And he's like, yep. And they're like, what if that wasn't going to be there? He's like, I probably would have lost. You know what I mean? Like, it's hilarious. So, all this leads to the next set of combat. And Yusuke actually has to fight right away again against the freaking ninja that has a Nazi symbol on his head. Which is another thing. Like, I'm trying to watch this stuff at the gym, and it's just like I know that in Japan, for a long time, that symbol had a whole different meaning, and it has nothing to do with that. But like, I'm watching this cartoon while I'm trying to ride on a stationary bike, and the man's got a fucking swastika on his head. Like, it was rough. Hopefully we're not going to have any more of that. But hopefully the people around me understood that I'm just watching this cartoon from the 90s and that, like, it's it's not like some pro-Nazi character, whatever. But then I might be like, why am I freaking out? Because if I watched some show, like some very serious live action show that had Nazis in it, like nobody would bat an eye. So, whatever. Moving on to the next thing, they go to this forest. And here's another sort of clever thing that they wrote in, is basically that this forest has had so many people die there during an important battle on Japanese soil that there are tons of spirits all over the forest. And so the spiritual energy is like super jacked up. So they are basically like, if you are out of energy from your last battle, the fact that we're fighting on this playing field means that you'll probably have your energy back. And it's just like, okay. But I like that actually, even though that's kind of like a convenience, because I don't, if we're going to have the stakes be like my guy loses all of his energy and then we're going to fight again, it's like going to be completely unbelievable that he wins against somebody that has spiritual powers if he doesn't even have the ability to use his own, which he kind of doesn't in the second battle. But he fights that dude, and second plot armor moment happens where my guy's getting dunked on. Not so bad, but just like he really doesn't have a way to beat this dude, and this dude can shoot a ray gun much more powerful than him, like out of his palm of his hand. It's like a very advanced technique, and he has these shuriken that like explode on impact and follow you, like heat-seeking missiles and all that kind of crap. And so what ends up happening is, while Yusuke is getting chased by these shuriken that are going to explode, he decides that he's just going to run at this dude. And then if he's going to die today, then at least this ninja's going to die too. And if this ninja happens to be the rando dude, then perfect, problem solved. If it's not him, then, well, Yusuke was going to die anyway, so who cares? And so this man is literally just like, I guess I die today. And he goes and runs at the dude, and in an instant, right before he gets to him, he disappears. And the guy freaks out. He's off his balance. He doesn't shoot his ray gun thing fast enough. And then he gets exploded by his own shuriken. Now, we find out that Yusuke fell into a puddle that was like right in front of the dude in this swamplands. And that's why he like disappeared. And everybody's like, oh, did you know that was there? Like, were you clever enough to know that's how you could disappear and stuff like that? And he was like, no, I literally accidentally fell in that bitch. Which was just like, this is the second time this man risked his life and was saved by a technicality. The first time being when he shot that ray gun shot at the mirror and it hit Hiei in his back. Crazy. Anyway, I actually liked it though. It was fun. It was a fun fight, whatever. It was all encapsulated in like half an episode, which was good too because it wasn't the big fight. There's no reason to draw this out, yada yada. The next person that fights is Kuwabara against the person who we now know to be Rando, because there's only one person left other than the two of them. And his name right now is Shorin, and he looks like this small little monk type of dude. But, if you know anything about these sort of yokai that we've experienced before, they all have like this transformation. So he's deceptively small. Against Kuwabara, he starts to use some of the techniques that he's stolen from other martial artists. So the old lady becomes aware of what's going on. And Kuwabara does his best to fight against this guy, because his first technique, he's like throwing fireballs at him, and he actually is able to easily bring forth his spirit sword again and actually bat the fireball back at him and hit him. But then he's like, screw it, and he ups the ante and he does a attack where he basically does like a freaking ninja hand symbol chant thing, and he shrinks Kuwabara down to the size of like a small mouse. Naturally, then he picks him up and he crushes all of his bones like that. And then he turns him back to normal after the lady calls the fight over. Two cool things happen in this moment. Yusuke gets super fired up because he thinks it's such bullshit that the fight was already over and he continued to hurt the guy, but then also that the enemy had done all this damage to, even though he won't admit it, one of his best friends, Kuwabara. And the second cool thing that happens is Kuwabara, when he's sort of in this They say both of his arms are shattered, he has a broken rib, and his leg is broken. And the first thing he says when he turns back to normal is he's like, Kuwabara the man has not died. Let me know when our next time we're going to fight is Yusuke. And then he passes out. And I just thought that was such like that's so on point for Kuwabara. Like, he is such that guy that is just like a strong-willed man, even though he has less power than, obviously our main character. But I thought it was cool. I like that. I like stuff like that in anime. That's like kind of why I get drawn to it. But so then the last episode we had of this bunch is Yusuke gets all fired up and pissed because he had just hurt Kuwabara. And Yusuke actually starts to put the beat down on this rando guy and defeats him, or defeats his human form. And he's like, well, you know what? That wasn't pretty bad. Guess that's all in a day's work. I won, old lady. And the old lady's like, no, things have just started if it's really this guy. And that's true. The guy wakes up and he transforms into his like yokai demon self. And that's pretty much the end of the episode. Now, I believe that this fight is going to resolve in the next episode. And I've actually already seen this fight the last time I tried to watch this show. But, my thoughts on these 4 episodes, I think they were pretty good. There was lots of humor mixed in where it's like, even though they were going to do some of these plot armor type stuff, they did call it out as silly itself in the show, kind of meta in that way. And then I really do like that they're building Kuwabara to be this character that just has natural spiritual sensitivity. And so he fits in well as like a companion character. And I like the way that these fights went, and the way that, they're layering in the information that Yusuke, as he gets more fired up, he has more and more energy, and everybody's impressed by that. Not just the old lady, not just like Koenma up in the sky, but like everybody is able to notice that, and they all find it like as this unique thing, which is cool because later on, it builds the framework for us to be able to have him excel and get stronger at a very fast pace, which is always good for an anime if you can explain why that's occurring. So without it being just like, well, like in Dragon Ball, they basically are be like, just because he needs to win this battle, he's going to get a new form. And in the past, it used to be like, well, we know that Saiyans have this Zenitsu boost where once they get beaten really badly, when they come back to normal, when they're healed up, they actually get a huge power boost because they were in a tough battle. And it keeps with them. So then that builds out sort of the thing where you see Goku and Vegeta never really get truly defeated by anybody. But all that being said, obviously, I'm going to wait to give this show like a number review until I'm finished the entire show. But I just want to make the comment that I am a silly willy because I looked at some of these episodes we're going to watch in the future, and I essentially came in within 3 episodes of when the big like dark tournament arc starts, and people say the show really picks up and turns into like the greatest action anime of all time. So joke's on me, but we're getting there. We're going to see those episodes. So, that was episode 9 through 12. I'll catch you guys on the next 4. See ya.